CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Powering the future. China and Russia launched their biggest joint nuclear power plant. Also,
The 10th day of violence in the Middle East as the conflict widens with rockets fired at Israel from Lebanese territory.
UK inflation more than doubles, fueling fears the economy will overheat as it recovers from the pandemic.
Brakes are slapped on Bitcoin, a 30% drop as China cracks down on cryptocurrency. Plus,
no words can describe this man-made horror.
We're in the Balkans to understand why the richer we get, the more waste we produce. China and Russia have stepped up cooperation in developing nuclear power stations. President Xi Jinping and Russia's President Putin have watched on video link the groundbreaking ceremony for the biggest ever joint nuclear energy project between the two countries.
well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Julia Chapman in Moscow. Julia, what more can you tell us about this event today?
Well, this was a virtual ceremony attended by Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin, where both leaders spoke about the importance of the strategic energy cooperation between Russia and China that has been building over the years. And this project was referred to by President Putin as a landmark project, an example of how Russia and China can really step up their work together in the energy sphere. Xi Jinping spoke about the importance of nuclear energy in China's low-carbon future, as well as how Russia can be involved in that strategic future, not just in China, but around the world. And of course, Russia does see this project as a major calling card for what it's capable of doing in the nuclear power sector. Russia is the world's leading nuclear energy technology exporter, and it's trying to expand these kinds of projects in many arenas of the world, particularly in Africa. But of course, because of the sensitivity of nuclear power in general, that has been a little bit difficult for it. But this project with China is really seen as an example of what Russia can do when it has trust with its partners.
What is the significance of the timing here? Because the deals for cooperation were signed, I think, back in 2018. Why has it taken 3 years to begin?
Well, nuclear projects can, of course, be very sensitive, and they do take time to be implemented. Of course, they do really underscore the trust, the growing partnership between Russia and China in the last few years. And of course, that has been growing in the face of ongoing difficulties, both with China and Russia and the West. And that, of course, comes as Russia has been trying to build greater economic cooperation with China. Trade, apart from a blip last year because of the pandemic, trade between Russia and China has been on the increase, and technology is certainly one of the biggest areas of cooperation between the two countries, increasingly ever more so, as we've seen earlier this year, Russia and China signing plans for a joint lunar base as they expand their space cooperation as well. But certainly as the two countries grow closer together, we're seeing greater trust between them, and that really is underscored by this project that is getting underway today.
Julia Chapman in Moscow, thank you very much.
Well, joining us now from London is Jonathan Cobb, who is from the World Nuclear Association. Thanks very much indeed for being with us on the programme today, Jonathan. So, nuclear technology somewhat fell out of favour after the Chernobyl and Fukushima nuclear accidents, but now it's back.
Yes, it is. And in fact, the amount of energy generated worldwide has been increasing over the last 7 or 8 years. Nuclear energy generates around 10.5% of the world's electricity. And that really needs to rise if we are going to decarbonise. So projects like the one announced today are really important in making progress on that.
So what are the advantages in this collaboration for both Russia and for China?
I think whenever you have a collaboration by this between two countries which have a lot of their own expertise in building nuclear power plants, you're getting an exchange of best practice, an ability to learn from each country's own way of doing things, finding out the best way of going forward. And of course, these kind of collaborations do also cement relationships between the two countries and between the companies involved. And that's a major step forward.
And you mentioned expertise there. Is there anything in particular that each country provides to the other?
Well, in these particular projects, one of them, the Tianwan site with units 7 and 8, there are already 6 reactors operating there, 4 Russian reactors and 2 Chinese reactors. And on that site, Russia will be bringing the equipment, they'll be working on the nuclear island, the foundations, and they'll also be supplying fuel to the reactor. On the other reactor site, where it's units 3 or 4 at Shadabao being built there, they will be providing a little bit more expertise in terms of supervising the project, supervising the commissioning of the reactors, because that's a new nuclear plant site where there are 2 Chinese reactors at the early stage of being constructed. But obviously there's less expertise in the area with projects such as this, and less history. So Russia will be bringing a bit more of a supervisory expertise to that project.
So how significant is this project, and how significant is the timing of it?
I think it's a very significant project. There are 4 Russian design reactors running in China at the moment, out of 50 reactors that there are in total. Those other reactors are a mix of Chinese-owned designs and also projects of collaboration that there have been with France, with Canada, and with the US. But by the announcement of these 4 new reactors, that's doubling the number of commercial power reactors of Russian design that'll be under construction and then eventually in operation in China. And the timing is also very significant, I think, because it comes the day after the International Energy Agency launched their Net Zero by 2050 report. That called for an almost immediate cessation of construction of unabated coal-fired power plants and much greater investment into all low-carbon technologies, but in particular looking at nuclear energy supplying perhaps 1/10 of the world's electricity in 2050. So these 4 reactors are a good contribution to achieving that target, but many more will be needed. Maybe 1,000 will be needed by 2050, 1,000 new reactors, if we're going to achieve that net zero target.
So how does this all feed into China's goal of carbon neutrality by 2060?
Well, it is very much part of that goal. China has a good history in building nuclear power plants and other low-carbon generation forms as well. So large hydro, solar and wind are all expanding in China along with nuclear energy. So these are all contributions to getting towards decarbonizing. China is looking to cap its emissions around 2030 and then to reduce them down to net zero by 2060. So these projects all contribute to that. On their own, they're very large zero carbon power generation projects, but many, many more will be needed over the next decades in order to achieve that long-term goal.
Jonathan Cobb, great to get your thoughts today. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme.
Thank you.
4 rockets have been launched into Israel from southern Lebanon, the 3rd such attack in a week. Israel returned fire into southern Lebanon, home to several militant groups. It raises the prospect that the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians could escalate as both sides endured a 10th day of fighting.
Well, all this comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that no options were off the table as Israel seeks to defeat Hamas. Let's talk now to our correspondent Stephanie Freed in southern Israel. Stephanie, what more can you tell us about the rocket fire from Lebanon?
Well, as you were saying, 4 rockets fired from Lebanon onto Israel. 1 was intercepted, 1 landed in an open space, and 2 fell into the sea. Israel retaliated with artillery fire, cannon fire. The common understanding, despite perhaps suspicions that there would be an escalation between Lebanon and Israel, the common understanding is there won't be an escalation there, and that's namely due to the political and economic crisis that Lebanon has been in for more than a year. On day 10, Wednesday, of this ongoing warring between Israel and Gaza, rockets and mortars continue to rain down on Israel. Israel continues pummeling Gaza. Israel's airstrikes took out another residential building. The death toll now in Gaza is more than 200 people have been killed. More than 1,500 people have been wounded. Tens of thousands are displaced. In Israel, as I was saying, the rockets and mortar fire continue. The death toll in Israel stands at 12. Hundreds of people have been wounded. Mediators are working tirelessly. They're trying to get a ceasefire agreement between the sides, but no imminent truce seems on the horizon right now. At the same time, another development on Wednesday, U.S. President Joe Biden increased the pressure on Israel. In a phone call with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he said he expects a significant de-escalation today, Wednesday, of this situation on the path to a ceasefire. Hours later, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement saying he's determined to continue this operation. Hours before that, Benjamin Netanyahu briefed ambassadors, diplomats, 70 of them from different countries posted to Israel, giving them a briefing on the current situation. Some of his comments included saying there's no stopwatch on this operation. And he intimated further escalation in his briefing, as well as calls for sanctions against Israel, or sanctions on Israel, and international investigation into Israel's actions in Gaza grow. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas accused Israel of war crimes. Let's listen to what both leaders had to say.
There are only two ways that you can deal with them. You can either conquer them, and that's always an open possibility, or you can deter them. And we are engaged right now in forceful deterrence, but I have to say we don't rule out anything.
What the occupation is doing in Gaza, including vicious attacks on civilians, deliberate shelling of residential areas and institutions, and the killing of women, elderly people and children, is organised state terrorism carried out by the Israeli occupation and war crimes.
And in a further development, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas is expected to arrive in Israel on Thursday. His plan is to shuttle between Ramallah and Jerusalem in an attempt to mediate a ceasefire agreement between the sides.
Stephanie Freed in southern Israel, thank you very much.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Legal woes are mounting for Donald Trump as a third criminal investigation is launched against the former president.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
What does a sustainable future mean? What can we do with millions of tons of plastics, glass, food, clothes piling up on our planet? Ahead of this year's pivotal COP26 summit, CGTN Europe looks at what consumers, businesses, and governments are doing to offer a better world to generations to come. Trash or treasure on CGTN Europe and online at cgtn.com.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe, live from London. Just a reminder, CGTN is available to watch for free on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, on YouTube and Dailymotion, cgtn.com and the CGTN app.
Now, the UK's annual inflation rate more than doubled in April. Prices are surging in Western economies following more than a year of coronavirus disruption. Juliette Mann has been crunching all the numbers.
I have. Thanks, Jamie. Well, inflation is what investors have been keeping an eye on, and it's expected to accelerate in the UK, especially as the economy starts to open up, not just here in the UK, but all around the world. Let's have a look at these headline CPI figures. You can see that in April, it surged to 1.5%. That was up from 0.7% the month before. So that's nearly more than double. And driving that is consumers spending their lockdown savings and a jump in the price of household bills, utilities and petrol at petrol stations after all the disruption that we've had over the last year. Now, some analysts think that inflation is going to blow past the Bank of England's target, their base rate there of 2%. This is what this yellow line is here, along here. Especially as the economy keeps building in the next couple of months. So the Bank of England, well, they're saying, you know what, it's going to be 2.5%, and then, by the end of 2021, and then get more the year after that and the year after that. You see, the concerns over a potential sharp rise in inflation has been one of those key influences behind all of the jitters that we've had, or the nervousness that we've had on international markets. And that is what is rattling investors.
And the big question is, are these numbers enough for the Bank of England to think, hang on, that's an end to the support, there's just too much cheap money out there and it's time to draw a line under furlough, as it's known in the UK?
Well, look, the rise in these numbers, it's what economists and what the Bank of England were expecting, and they would have been higher if it wasn't for all of that those coronavirus tax breaks. But you're right, what investors are looking for are clues as to whether central banks are going to raise interest rates sooner than they planned. And when I say what they planned, we're expecting that to happen really next year rather than sooner. Right now, as you say, interest rates are at record lows, borrowing is cheap, and that's all designed for consumers and businesses to get out there and start spending to stoke economic growth. I mentioned utility bills and petrol. Well, UK house prices, they have surged at the fastest rate since August 2007. And the vaccine rollout, that's sort of empowered and given consumers the confidence to go out there and spend their savings on eating out, like you, on new clothes. Like me, exactly. New hotels, new furniture, and prices of all of those things have risen sharply in April. So nobody can really quite decide if these inflation numbers are a new trend or the beginning of a trend, or if it's a phase that's really just prices getting distorted because the economy's getting back into gear after the lockdown, after the pandemic. Raising interest rates could cool things down, but so could other things. I mean, we've been talking a lot on this programme about resurgence, new waves of COVID-19 in other nations. There's a lot of anxiety about different variants, and these are the things that rattle not just consumers, but investors, industry, policymakers too. And
is this just a UK picture? Can we just widen this out? What is the picture beyond the UK?
This is happening everywhere.
Yeah.
In fact, after those UK numbers, we had data out of the EU. Inflation running at 1.6%. That's a jump. Last week, US inflation data showed prices were already more than double the US Fed Reserve's target. Worldwide, what we're seeing is prices of commodities already rising higher, and that's with all of those renewable energy projects that we've seen lots of the developed countries investing in. I'm talking trillions of dollars. That's pushing commodities prices up. But do you know what, Jamie? I think it's the big picture. So, I mean, we want to see what's happening over the entire year rather than this monthly snapshot to get a real idea of what's going on. I mean, at current levels, it's a short-term overshoot. Well, I mean, at least that's what a lot of analysts are telling me. In which case, inflation isn't something to fret about, but the seeds have probably been sown for an inflation scare a little bit further ahead. So we've got to keep our eyes on it.
All right, well, we'll keep on coming back to it. And Juliet, for the moment, thank you very much. Juliet Mann there.
Well, let's see how inflation is rattling the markets in New York and head live to John Terrett, our correspondent in Wall Street. Yes. Hello to you, John. So inflation back in the headlines, as we've been hearing there. What's
Robin.
The mood on Wall Street?
Yeah. Well, inflation isn't really top of the agenda at the moment. Where we're at today is we're in the middle of retail earnings season. Now, you know, when I first came to America about 20 years ago, I am sure that earnings season used to be done and dusted in about 3 weeks flat. And now it goes on and on and on. And this week is retail earnings. So we're having some of the biggest names in retail here tell us how they are getting on. And let me begin with the world's biggest shop, Walmart. It's big in terms of the size of its buildings. They're enormous, like football fields inside. The number of people they get through their doors, the stuff they sell. That's why they're the world's biggest shop. They used to own Asda in the UK, but I think they're selling that now to somebody else. Anyway, Walmart beat Wall Street expectations handily. It is a Dow Jones component as well, and they did it through the sale of groceries and also their big e-commerce division, which they're trying to rival Amazon with, and they're doing a pretty good job of it as well. And Walmart also says that it sees a lot of pent-up demand because there's so much money washing around the U.S. economy at the moment from what the Americans call stimmy or stimulus, that they see an opportunity to, move forward and do well in the future. So Walmart shares are up about 2%. Target is a big box store. They'll sell you a big box, but in that big box will be lots of different things that you might want to take home. And they're doing very well as well, beating Wall Street expectations. Now, the stores used to be a mess. You used to go in there at 7:30 in the evening. There'd be clothes all over the floor, shoes all over the floor, out of the boxes and things. And the new CEO came in and cleaned all that up, spent a fortune on rebuilding some of the stores. And so they're now doing well as a result of the upgrade. Also, they have brought in some big brands to their stores that people like to buy. And on top of that, they've got something called curbside delivery that's worked out very well for them. I don't know why this has happened for Target, but it has. People have been ordering stuff online and then driving to the store to pick it up. So curbside delivery is one of the reasons for their success. And Home Depot, which is a bit like B&Q in the UK or Sainsbury's Homebase, that sort of thing. They've got everything you need to do your home up. And they crushed Wall Street with their earnings this week. Another Dow Jones component here doing well. And that's because so many Americans have been remodeling their home during the lockdown. One other thing which I think is very well worth mentioning, this is the big day in New York when the governor is lifting all the mask mandates. So you don't have to wear a mask in New York State anymore if you're fully vaccinated, unless you're going into the subway, which I think is fair enough, or a nursing home, or indeed jail. But I have no intention of going to jail, I'll tell you that now. Dow Jones then, NASDAQ, S&P 500, all down 1% at the moment as money moves out of tech and into the post-pandemic kind of stocks, and the Dow is presently negative for the month of May. Robin?
So, John, let's talk about this criminal probe against former President Donald Trump's organisation. How serious might this be for former President Trump?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm happy to talk about this. This is a very serious story, so let's devote some time to it, because I think it significantly increases the chance of criminal charges being filed against those in the Trump organization. So President Trump, his children, and the staff who've worked for them for a very long time. Now, the Manhattan District Attorney, Cyrus Vance, is the most powerful prosecutor in the United States, and he is teaming up with the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, in what is a very, very unusual move. Normally, the New York State Attorney General deals only with consumer issues. I can't remember the last time she filed or tried to file any criminal charges. So it's a very, very unusual move that these two offices come together. The assumption is that the New York State Attorney General knows something to enhance the investigation going on into President Trump's businesses by the Southern District here in New York. They're using something called the Martin Act, which is a very, very broad law that allows them to go after obviously listed companies like the ones here, but also private companies like the Trump Organization, as long as they trade in New York, which the Trump Organization does. I will remind you, it is very difficult to pin down financial crime on anybody or any corporation. They're looking into fraud, alleged fraud, in terms of tax, banking and insurance. President Trump has said this is all politically motivated and that the company has done nothing wrong. It's going to come down to exactly what is on the charge sheet. If they get to the point of charging anybody in the Trump Organization, it's going to come down to the wording of what the accusations actually are. I will remind you that Michael Cohen, who is President Trump's former personal lawyer, testified to Congress last year in the early part of 2019 and said that there was fraud in the organization at that point. He was commenting, of course, under the terms of parliamentary privilege. Cohen, they later went to jail for tax evasion and also campaign finance violations. It is, whichever way you cut it, though, the story that we woke up to in America this morning, and everybody here is talking about it for obvious reasons. Robin?
John, good to talk to you. John Terrett there, live in New York.
And staying with the United States, the government there is postponing a ban on trading shares of Chinese companies with alleged links to the military. The restrictions will take effect in June rather than late May. The delay is intended to give investors more time to comply. The ban was first announced towards the end of the Trump presidency.
India's biggest automotive group, Tata Motors, has posted a $1 billion first-quarter loss as restructuring costs at its Jaguar Land Rover group hit the bottom line. The group spent $2 billion as it tries to turn around the British luxury car brand. Tata Motors' revenue jumped by 42% during the period.
British online fashion retailer Boohoo says it will now link multi-million-dollar bonuses for its directors to improvements in its supply chain. This comes after pressure from UK lawmakers and its own shareholders over allegations of poor working and pay conditions for garment workers. Boohoo's annual reports reveal total executive pay had fallen in the last financial year.
China's tech giant Baidu has registered a strong first-quarter performance. Its total revenue grew 25% year-on-year, powered by income from its non-advertising sector. The Beijing-based company has been diversifying its income. In recent years, its cloud and AI services, together with smart driving technologies, have grown rapidly.
Bad week for Britcoin investors. Just got worse. Leading cryptocurrency plunged nearly 30%. It had been steadily falling following the sharp U-turn by Tesla a week ago over car purchases. Now, China has issued a warning on the use of the currency, sparking concerns of a potential crackdown. Just a month ago, Bitcoin hit a record high of nearly $65,000. Other leading cryptocurrencies also saw sharp falls.
Rich Turin is the author of Cashless, China's Digital Currency Revolution. I asked him what the reasons were behind China's Bitcoin position.
This is less of a crackdown and more of a restatement of existing laws from 2013 and 2017. The 2013 laws that stopped financial institutions from dealing in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin are, as always, in effect, as is the 2017 law that put an end to the very chaotic and very dangerous ICO, or initial clearing market. So really, there's no new law so much as a restatement or re-emphasis on the severity of dealing in cryptocurrencies in China.
What will the impact of it be, do you think? We've already seen the price falling, as you said.
Well, that's a tough question because really the Chinese investors love very risky, very volatile investments. So in a certain degree, Chinese investors are drawn like a magnet to Bitcoin because it goes up and down and it's lots of fun, and that's good. So really it's going to be hard to understand or hard to see exactly how this will prevent investors who are motivated to buy into cryptocurrency from doing it. They already are in large numbers. But I think that it's good function of government to go out and tell people, hey, this is risky. You can get burned in it. And if you get burned, there's no recourse to go back to your bank or anyone else. You lose the money, it's yours, and it's gone.
And when it comes to mining Bitcoin, China produces an enormous volume of the global total. So why is it such a hotspot?
Absolutely. China produces at one point some 75% of what's called the hash rate, which is essentially the computing power that went behind Bitcoin. And it was in China because of access to inexpensive electricity. To produce Bitcoin and to use Bitcoin, you have to solve very complex mathematical equations that require a lot of, and with it, a lot of electricity. So if electricity is cheap, you can mine Bitcoin more effectively or more efficiently. And it will be interesting to watch to see what happens with Bitcoin mining in China going forward, because China is going green and has strict carbon limits now, carbon production limits. So will Bitcoin, which is a big user of electricity, be allowed in the future? And my take is I think it's on very thin ice.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Pack your bags, get your passport ready. The European Union set to ease restrictions for vaccinated foreign tourists.
More than 100,000 people in Italy have now died from COVID-19.
The vaccination programme offers some hope for the future, but intensive care units are near capacity.
The Spanish government is hoping to vaccinate over 1 million people by next month.
Living in Germany are struggling with their mental health.
Hungary is supplementing the EU's vaccine rollout, buying doses from Russia and China to speed up the process.
4 million people have tested positive in France.
After a grim winter, the promise of a spring bloom that could mean freedom for millions.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome! We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Powering the future. China and Russia launched their biggest joint nuclear power plant.
The 10th day of violence in the Middle East as the conflict intensifies with rockets fired at Israel from Lebanese territory.
And the brakes are slammed on Bitcoin, a 30% drop as China cracks down on cryptocurrency.
The low-cost airline Ryanair has scored 2 victories in its campaign to block billions of dollars in bailouts for rival carriers after Europe's second highest court scrapped EU-approved aid for KLM and Portugal's TAP airline.
The win comes as the European Union agreed to ease travel restrictions on non-EU visitors ahead of the summer tourist season. Let's talk now to our correspondent Tony Waterman, who is in Brussels. So, Tony, what did the court say, and how will that impact carriers who've been bailed out during the pandemic?
Well, Robin, the EU General Court said that the European Commission, which had signed off on this state aid, did not adequately justify these bailouts. We're talking about $4 billion for the Dutch carrier KLM and $1.5 billion for Portugal's TAP. And they annulled the aid, but they suspended the annulments and the recovery of this money until the Commission decides what it wants to do next. And Brussels said today that it's going to look over these judgments and then it is going to make a decision. But this is the first victory for Ryanair in its fight to try to block its rivals' billion-dollar bailouts. It has filed 16 of these challenges. It has lost 5 of them so far. And early on in the pandemic, it was the Commission that decided that it was going to ease some of these rules around state aid so that industries that were really struggling to survive during the height of the pandemic could be offered some sort of support. But Ryanair said that for the airlines industry, which was some of the biggest recipients of this type of state aid and support, that it just led to an unfair advantage and that these airlines would emerge stronger after this pandemic than the peers that did not receive this type of state aid.
And Tony, Europe's also come one big step closer to flinging its doors open to international travellers, but there is a catch, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. So the EU ambassadors today, all 27 of them backed this proposal to allow in tourists who have been fully vaccinated. But the catch is that they have to be fully vaccinated with an EU-approved vaccine. So that's Pfizer, BioNTech, Moderna, AstraZeneca, or Johnson & Johnson. Another way that they can get in is if the country they're coming from or live in is on a safe list, if that country has COVID under control. And very crucially here, there's going to be a loosening of what defines under control. So right now it's at 25 cases per 100,000 inhabitants. That's going to get bumped up reportedly to 75. So that's going to expand the list of countries that will become eligible under that criteria. The UK would make it, but the United States would not. We're going to get a list likely on Friday. So we're going to see what comes out of this. But of course, this is happening just as the summer season is about to kick off. A lot of countries, especially those southern ones like Italy and Greece, really get a lot of their income at this time of year.
Tony, thank you. Tony Waterman there in Brussels.
Well, as Tony was explaining, COVID restrictions are now easing, at least in some places. Virginia Messina is from the World Travel and Tourism Council. I asked her if restrictions are being lifted fast enough to prevent hundreds of thousands more tourism jobs from being lost.
The impact of this crisis has been devastating, and we know 62 million jobs were lost in 2020, but many more remain at risk. So our economy will not hold up unless those restrictions are eased and we have a strong summer.
Wherever you're watching in the world, I guess everyone is gagging for a summer holiday and a getaway. I wonder, from the perspective of the industry, how key is the summer holiday season for the tourist industry's recovery?
I mean, depending on the regions around the world, but of course, particularly in Europe or the UK, this is the strongest season. And that's why probably we're seeing some very strong steps at the European Union level to reopen now in light of the summer. But it really is critical and pivotal for some economies to the next few months ahead.
Governments around the world will tell you what matters is keeping their populations safe. I mean, what do you want? What assistance do you need? What does the sector require at this time?
Absolutely. Health remains the priority. However, we should take advantage of the successful vaccination rollouts in some parts of the world and key markets such as the UK, the US, and some other countries in Europe that are really speeding the vaccination. So what we need to see is some confidence in terms of the fact that travel can be done safely in a combination of measures like rapid testing, health and safety protocols, and of course the vaccines.
Tell me about the wider impact that the COVID pandemic has had on the global travel and tourism industry.
Just to give you a quick example, the previous crisis that hit our sector very hardly was the global financial crisis in 2009. Our travel and tourism GDP dropped by 4%. This time, during COVID, the travel and tourism contribution to GDP dropped by nearly 50%. So this crisis has hit us 18 times harder than that. We know millions of jobs and businesses have been devastated. As I said earlier, 62 million jobs lost. Many more remain at risk, supported by government financial schemes. So unless we can really see international travel to begin to unlock over the next few months, many more businesses will go under and many more livelihoods will be impacted.
And I want to ask you about the skilled tourism workers. The tourism sector simply stopped during the pandemic around the world. Many tourism workers had to obviously find alternative employment. Do you think those trained, experienced, skilled people in tourism will now return, or has the industry been left desperately searching for new talent, having lost a generation?
I think we are seeing some good schemes in some countries around the world to really try to attract some of these workers. I mean, our industry is very diverse. As we know, we're interconnected across so many different sectors, and many different skills really apply and support our sector. So I think it's going to be a combination. I think people say that once you go into travel, your heart stays there and stays connected. So we hope to see many come back, but of course there's always an opportunity to welcome new people.
And people in France are once again able to sit outside a cafe or a restaurant in the next stage of the government's COVID reopening strategy. The nationwide curfew will also be relaxed to start at 9 p.m. local time instead of 7. Ross Cullen reports now from Paris.
I'm here in central Paris, coming to a cafe to do something I haven't done for 6 months: sit down at a terrace and have some food and drink outside. From the 19th of May, the government has relaxed the restrictions on cafes and bars, and they can now open their outdoor terraces for the first time since the second lockdown came in October 2020. Also, on Wednesday, I'm able to remove my face mask. It's obligatory to wear them outside in France if you are at a terrace sitting down to have some food and drink. But it's not just the national cuisine, that kind of symbolic terrace which has been affected positively by the moves the government has made this Wednesday. It's also cultural venues. Their restrictions are being eased as well. You can now go to a museum, a gallery, a cinema or a theatre, although the total capacity of visitors that will be allowed is governed by the specific floor size of the particular venue, and non-essential shops are also opening from the 19th of May. Also taking place this Wednesday, another restriction being eased is the curfew. A nationwide curfew has been in place in some form or other in France since the middle of December. It's currently 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's going to be loosened starting on Wednesday evening at 9 p.m, allowing people more time to spend some time outside with their friends for the first time since October 2020. The government is hoping for a successful strategy of loosening restrictions to go alongside its vaccination programme. More than 20 million people, that's more than a third of the French population, have received at least one COVID-19 vaccination so far. The government's next target is to have given a first vaccination to at least 30 million people by the middle of next month. And June also marks the next stage of the government's reopening strategy, when you will be able to eat inside a cafe, bar or restaurant, and also the curfew will be eased even further if the health situation allows. And crucially, for the tourist season, the government hopes to be able to open its borders to non-essential tourism. Ross Cullen, CGTN, at a cafe here in Paris.
Meanwhile, there's also been an easing of restrictions in the Netherlands. Stefan de Vries has more from Amsterdam.
They've been waiting for more than 6 months, but today bar and restaurant owners can finally serve customers outside all day. The change is part of the government's 6 phases for reopening the country.
In spite of the cold and rain, staff are eager to start again.
I'm excited, happy, yeah. Happy to welcome the guests. Happy to see all my staff back again on the floor. So I'm looking forward to the summer.
Patrons have to follow certain rules, like keeping 1.5 meters social distance and scan a QR code.
But they need to register in order to know when the corona hits us. We can contact them and to inform them, so yeah.
Now the terraces are open again, caterers face another obstacle, a shortage of staff.
Right now we're a team of 20 people, but I think in the middle of the summer we definitely need 70 people, so we need to upscale a lot. We are looking to the wages, maybe increase them, find another creative way to attract new personnel. So yeah, a tough job.
Today is just a second step. From now on, terraces can stay open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Outdoor entertainment venues like zoos and amusement parks can reopen as well, just like swimming pools and gyms. This brand new club wasn't lucky. They opened just a week before the lockdown in December. Today, the manager is ecstatic.
I'm feeling amazing today. I opened the door at 6 a.m. this morning, and, well, there was a tear in my eye.
So how does it feel to be back in the gym again?
Very good, actually. It's been almost about 1.5 years. Working outside is really nice as well, but to be able to work with real equipment is the best thing ever.
Yeah. But they too have to follow some rules.
We have to keep a distance, 1.5 meters. We have to have a routing in the club. Not all the machines are available, so the rules are quite strict. We can have like 200 people at the same time working out using a locker.
Yeah, and now it is?
30 in the whole club, so men and women, 30 max.
Yeah. Next week, the government will announce a further relaxation of the rules. The number of infections in the Netherlands has been decreasing over the last couple of weeks, so there is hope that slowly but surely things will get back to normal again. If only the weather could be as optimistic as the Dutch. Stefan de Vries, CGTN, Amsterdam.
The UK government is being criticised for its latest advice on foreign travel, which opposition parties and travel companies say is confusing. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer said the so-called traffic light system was contradictory. There's been a surge in bookings to countries on the so-called amber list, for which people are required to take COVID tests and quarantine at home for 10 days. But Prime Minister Boris Johnson says people should only travel to an amber list country for extreme circumstances, such as serious illness of a family member.
Staying in the UK, and some news just in, Health Secretary Matt Hancock says there's been a 28% rise in UK cases of the COVID variant first identified in India over the past 2 days. But he also said there was increasing evidence that vaccines are effective against the variant.
Restaurants, cinemas, sports facilities and hotels reopened in Austria after more than 6 months' closure due to the pandemic. Proof of a negative COVID test is required, but children under 10 are exempt. All customers are still required to wear face masks, respect the 2-metre distancing rule and register their personal details.
India has set a new record for daily COVID deaths, with over 4,500 in the past 24 hours. The total number of infections passed 25 million, with the death toll exceeding 280,000, second only to the United States. Prime Minister Narendra Modi promised to increase COVID-19 vaccines amid fears that deaths are going unreported.
China has renewed its call for the international community to help Africa fight the pandemic and address development challenges. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has been addressing a United Nations Security Council meeting on Africa. China holds the rotating chair of the UNSC this month. Wang also called for the lifting of economic sanctions against Sudan and Zimbabwe.
Investigations are underway after a skyscraper in China began to shake, sending people running to safety. Completed in 2000, the tower in the city of Shenzhen is home to a major electronics market as well as various offices. Authorities say there was no earthquake when the incident happened.
China's Space Authority has released the first pictures taken by its Mars rover Zhurong. The probe landed on the Red Planet last Friday and will spend 90 days there. It'll study the soil and atmosphere of the planet and look for signs of life. China is only the second country in the world to successfully put a rover on Mars after the United States. Spain has vowed to restore order after the unprecedented surge of migrants across its border with Morocco. The country has accused the Moroccan government of using migration as a political tool. Rahul Pathak reports.
Spain is struggling to deal with this latest wave of migrants. More than 24 hours after Spain registered the single largest number of arrivals in one day, they continue to cross the border into Ceuta, a Spanish enclave in Morocco. Some estimates suggest up to 8,000 migrants have reached these Spanish beaches by swimming and using inflatables. The influx is straining diplomatic relations. Spain believes the Moroccan government has turned a blind eye following a recent dispute over Western Sahara, a territory occupied by Morocco. Moroccan politicians warned of repercussions after a rebel leader fighting Moroccan rule was admitted to hospital in Spain to be treated for COVID. Now, the crisis has forced the Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, to cancel a planned trip to Paris, where he was supposed to attend, of all things, a summit on financial aid to Africa. Instead, he says he's remaining here in Spain to focus on what's going on in Ceuta, promising maximum firmness by the authorities in an effort to restore order in the enclave.
The army has been deployed to the border and we have increased the number of state security forces to 400. We are proceeding with the immediate return of those who have entered illegally. We have already deported nearly 5,000 people to Morocco from those that entered illegally 2 days ago from the autonomous city of Ceuta.
Spain did agree a deal back in 2019 which allowed them to return migrants found at sea directly back to Moroccan ports. Closed-door policies by Italy and Malta have increased migration flows towards Spanish shores. Now both Spain and Morocco must look for a quick solution to this current crisis. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Trash or treasure? We report from the Balkans on our growing rubbish problem. Why do we produce more waste as we get richer?
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Separated by geography, but united by so much more. From transport links to trade links, cultural ties to business ties. We'll find out why China and Eastern Europe have never been closer.
I'm Penelope Liesch in Budapest. I'll be taking you inside a school that's bringing Hungary and China closer together.
I am Aljoša Milenković in Belgrade. And I'll tell you how Chinese technology is helping a power plant in Serbia.
I'm Kate Baklitska in Kiev, Ukraine.
and I'll be explaining how Chinese companies have teamed up with the Ukrainian Postal Service.
I'm George Gogua in Tbilisi. I'll be showing you around a brand new town that was conceived in China and constructed in Georgia.
Join us for our special series, The Way Forward, on CGTN.
What does a sustainable future mean? What can we do with millions of tons of plastics, glass, food, clothes piling up on our planet? Ahead of this year's pivotal COP26 summit, CGTN Europe looks at what consumers, businesses, and governments are doing to offer a better world to generations to come. Trash or Treasure on CGTN Europe and online at cgtn.com.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. All this week, we're reporting on the world's growing waste problem and some of the solutions. It's a major issue affecting Europe's Balkans region, where the amount of household waste is growing rapidly as living standards rise. Alyosha Milenkovic reports from the Visegrad Artificial Lake in the Bosnian region of Republika Srpska.
This is what an environmental disaster looks and sounds like. Plastic bottles banging at each other while floating on the Visegrad Dam lake. The lake was built over 30 years ago on the then pristine Drina River to service a hydropower plant. I feel that no words can describe this man-made horror. Just the sight of it tells way much more than any reporter can do. And as I was told, this is nothing compared to what it was here back in January. For years, thousands of tons of waste from dozens of illegal waste dumps ended up in the waterway. The dam stops its flow downstream and causes a serious problem for the power station, which needs to remove the rubbish or risk damage.
A huge amount of trash is beneath the water, and it is hard to give an exact estimate, but we think that in just a few months of this year, around 12 to 13,000 cubic meters of trash came. And we expect more by the end of the year. In this same period, we've extracted 5,300 cubic meters from the lake.
Environmental groups are pressuring authorities with little or no progress at all.
What is obvious is the lack of communication with the relevant ministries. We've sent numerous emails to them and never got any reply. Our feeling is that eco-organizations here are powerless and their voices cannot be heard.
But this is an international problem, according to one Serbian environmental group.
The vast majority of this trash comes from 5 municipalities in Montenegro. None of those municipalities have a sanitary landfill. We did have a major problem with one landfill in Serbia, but it's closed now and it's stopped posing any risk.
And here it is, now former landfill in question, seemingly posing no further danger. But just a few kilometers away, another still active dump. So, while some steps have been taken to tackle the spiraling waste problem, a coordinated solution seems to be very far off. Alyosha Milenkovic, CGTN, Visegrad.
And tomorrow we're reporting from a German plastics recycling plant to find out how a ban on single-use plastic will improve their waste problem. This story and many more from across Europe in our waste special, Trash or Treasure, at europe.cgtn.com, on Facebook, YouTube and Instagram.
Well, that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching. We're on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, on YouTube and Dailymotion, cgtn.com and the CGTN app.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.